Welcome to the klutchkittengaming podcast, where I play an indie game for 5 hours and let you know whether or not it's worth your time and money. Hello and welcome everyone, this is James, also known as Clutch Kitten, and I'm so glad that you're here for episode 63 of this show, which is the first episode of 2020. I don't know about you, but the holidays were insanely busy for me, and although there were a lot of enjoyable aspects, I am quite glad to be back in the normal swing of things. Before we touch on the news and then this week's game, I want to mention two quick things. First off, if you like the show, I would love it if you went to Apple Podcasts to give it a 5-star review. Not only is it super helpful for visibility in the space, but it's an encouragement to me as well. Second, if you're interested in interacting with me on a more regular basis, I'm regularly on Instagram and Twitter now, finally. It's taken forever, and I would love to hear from you. You can find the show on Instagram at klutchkittengaming and on Twitter at KKG Podcast. In the news this week, there are two related pieces that caught my attention. First off, according to a Taiwanese electronics newspaper called Digitimes, a new Switch model is set to be released in mid-2020. I'm personally a bit skeptical as to whether or not this is true, but there's a lot of speculation that it will be a Switch Pro, possibly with 4K capabilities and other improved components. Our second piece of news is regarding a gadget called the Concept UFO by Alienware. This was announced at CES 2020, which is the big tech convention that just happened, and the particularly intriguing thing, if I can say that, about this announcement is how similar this device looks to the Switch. According to the press release, Concept UFO features an 8-inch screen with 1900 by 1200 resolution. It also includes detachable controllers, so you can game in a range of modes as one unit, with controllers attached to the screen, separating the controllers and using the kickstand on a surface to game or stream your favorite show, or you can connect it to an external display and play using a detached controller, or use a mouse and keyboard as you would any other PC. There are lots of options, but if you look at the picture of this, it literally just looks like a more Alienware Switch. A lot of the details are still up in the air for this device, but I think it's pretty safe to assume it's going to have stronger computing power than the Switch. I'm personally pretty skeptical about where the Alienware device will find a home in the current market, but I am excited to see more details regarding both pieces of news. Let's move on now to this week's game. Today we're going to be talking about a little game called Pikuniku, which is a 2D puzzle exploration game that was released on PC and Switch in January of 2019, and it was developed by SectorDub. SectorDub was founded on July 4th of 2016 by Arnaud Debach, and it seems to have developers in both London and Paris. The four primary individuals who worked on Pikuniku, which is the studio's first game, are Arnaud, who previously worked on a game called Reigns, which you may be familiar with. It's on mobile and a few other things. Remy Forsadel, Alan Zucconi, and Callum Bowen. Currently, Pikuniku costs $12.99 and will take you anywhere from 3 to 5 hours to beat. When it comes to controls, I personally played it on the Switch Lite, which was a lovely place to experience the game, but both mouse and keyboard as well as gamepad should work just fine for you. Apart from a little bit of platforming during the boss fights, it's honestly a pretty forgiving and mechanically easy game. Let's move on now to the narrative. Generally, I start this section out with a small skit to set the scene, but I was struggling to write something that wasn't completely out of my ass because the game sets up next to no context for who your character is. The world you wake up to is both incredibly strange and yet oddly familiar. It's a colorful world full of weirdly shaped beings and you somehow find yourself sealed off in a cave with a ghost by your side. Despite everything being minimal and abstract, the characters and townsfolk themselves have very human-like personalities. The artist lacks confidence, the storekeeper is insecure about his business, and the boy just wants to be cool. In some ways, Pikuniku's narrative is like a lazy river that's meant to provide a relaxing and fun journey, and in other ways, it adds in surprise waterfalls and rapids because real-life issues, emotions, and ideals are mixed into the experience. The juxtaposition of the cute feel with deeper themes is kind of odd at first glance, but it strikes a great balance for the game as a whole. It's light enough to be fun and low-key, but it has enough depth to be relatable. When it comes to the actual writing, it's incredibly endearing. The characters are snarky, funny, and show the heart of what the developers were hoping to convey. Another thing to mention is that the entire experience is family-friendly without feeling dumbed down. This isn't a game to play if you want complex or dark themes, but for the experience it's meant to be, the story is perfect. Clearly the narrative is something special, but how does the gameplay hold up? It ends up striking a very similar chord to the narrative. There's more depth than meets the eye, but I would never label Pikuniku as a hardcore game. As I mentioned previously, Pikuniku is described as an exploration puzzle game. However, the gameplay is so fluid and abstract that the genre doesn't fully encompass what you're actually doing. Throughout your time with the game, you'll complete small platforming challenges, fetch items for NPCs, have a rhythm game dance-off with a robot, draw a face for a scarecrow, and so much more. Honestly, describing the experience as a puzzle game is a bit of a misnomer because there aren't many puzzles at all, or at least the puzzles included are really simple. This leads us into the big question of whether or not the gameplay is enjoyable. Conceptually, all the minigames and challenges fit the game like a glove, but do they feel good to play? Thankfully, the vast majority of the game is super fun. None of the mechanics or systems are particularly impressive or challenging, but for a 4-hour experience that is more about good vibes than anything else, complex mechanics aren't necessary. Because no one mechanic is overly deep, it was actually a smart choice to add so many minigame type sections. It kept the game moving and added even more charm and humor to the overall package. If I have to complain about one aspect of the game, it would be that messing up in a boss fight is really annoying. In one of the fights in particular, if you fall off a platform during any of the boss stages, you have to start from stage 1 after a surprisingly long reload. Don't get me wrong, I do understand that the developers wanted to create some tension in those moments, but for a game that is sweet and easy to play like drinking a berry smoothie, hitting those boss fail states was like trying to suck a giant blueberry through a tiny straw. It impeded progress in an unnatural way, and they could have made it so that messing up in a fight was less irritating. The last thing I want to mention about gameplay is how incredibly fun something as simple as movement is. Your character is basically a sideways jelly bean with legs, and you're given a surprising amount of movement options. You can jump, you can tuck your legs and roll around, you can kick the poor townsfolk in their heads, and you can use your legs to swing like Tarzan. I know that movement sounds like a pretty ridiculous element to praise, but it's one of those things that makes so much more sense once you get your hands on a controller. For a game that doesn't have one focal point or standout mechanic, the development team created a movement system that made the simple task of traversal way more enjoyable. Now that we've made it through the narrative and gameplay, let's discuss the art and sound design. On the visual side, this game is just too cute. It's colorful and minimalistic in a clever way that doesn't feel too elementary or even snobby. The look is charming and immediately will bring a smile to your face. In a similar way, the animations don't overload the screen or overstay their welcome. They instead offer life and character to the world. Possibly my favorite aspect of the game is your character's animation whenever you stop moving. In most games, your character just stops. Period. In Pikuniku, a really subtle animation takes place where your character's legs keep moving for a millisecond and then it brings them back to their original place like a soldier at attention. My explanation doesn't do it justice, but when you see the movement for yourself, you should understand right away. It's brilliant and cute. It's the details like that which elevate the game and make it extra special in a world where minimalistic platform adventure games really aren't all that rare. On the sound design side, the soundtrack is lovely. The music is upbeat and happy and complements every aspect of the game. It's weird because I'm struggling to come up with much more to say, but I think that's a testament to what this game is. What you see and hear is mostly what you get, and that's totally okay because what you see and hear is wonderful. Now that we've talked about the narrative, gameplay, art and sound design, let's summarize with some positives and negatives. First off, on the positive side, I appreciate how well balanced the narrative is. Its goal isn't to change your worldview or make you think hard about a particular topic, but it's also willing to incorporate real human themes and emotions into a mostly lighthearted story. Second, in a similar way, the gameplay doesn't try to do more than it should. The systems are simple, fun, and don't overstay their welcome. Third, the art and sound design immediately set a positive tone for the game and round out the experience perfectly. On the negative side, my only real complaint is what I mentioned about the boss levels. I think some tweaks could have been made to maintain a better flow in those particular instances, but it's such a minor complaint that it's almost not worth mentioning. We've made it now to the final boss. This is the part of the podcast where I let you know whether you should slay the game and buy it, flee the game and avoid it, or farm up and wait for a sale. My verdict for Pikuniku is to slay this game. What's so amazing about this experience is that nearly anyone can enjoy it. Whether you want a palate cleanser to get you through to your next Souls game, or a fun game to play for date night, or a game to play with your 5-year-old kid, this is totally worth your time and money. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to listen in and for choosing to hang out with me in 2020. If you want to continue supporting the show this year, consider telling a friend about it, and don't be afraid to reach out via email at klutchkittengaming@gmail.com. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you in game.